Hey, Jim, Mike, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you just fine.
Okay, I had to switch to my uh, iPad this week because my battery on my brand new MacBook Air fried last week.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah. Can't hear you, Jim.
I've got a Dell laptop and I had my battery kind of explode and it just like mushroomed up and cracked the whole, not cracked the case, but lifted it all up. And I took it into a local independent shop and they replaced the battery and assembled the case and good as new and a couple $100.
Well, I bought AppleCare, and so I went down to City Mac and said, "You're good. We'll get it taken care of.
Oh, good.
Should have it for you by the end of the week. Good thing you got AppleCare."
Well, that's great, John.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, I got a couple other ideas I want to share with you on other matters at some point.
Yeah. I'll give you a call.
Hey, Mike, so just educate me. When I'm on my iPad, I'm not going to be able to see the the participants are under the separate tab. I just see the list of the names. When I go to participants, there's not a separate screen for everything, right?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've used an iPad, but I think you're correct.
Okay.
Right now, who are you seeing? Are you seeing Jim and I?
7 total participants, the 3 of us plus 4.
Yeah, so if you can't actually select on like the attendees button, then that's probably exactly what you were saying.
Okay, just getting myself clear here before we start rocking and rolling.
Totally understand. Yep.
Morning, John.
Hey, Steve, how are you this morning?
Not as good as I was last night when I talked to you.
Okay.
How are you, John?
Busy. And to Northern Virginia and back since Thursday night. And meetings all day and a retreat last night. And go. But that's okay. And then my laptop fried. So I've got my iPad today. So I get to sort out an iPad on Zoom today. So
Your tie looks better. Your tie looks better on iPad.
iPads. Oh, okay. There you go.
No, it's a good tie no matter what you, it's a good tie, John. Good
There
pick.
you go.
Good,
There you go.
good shirt tie combination. So you started the day right. Let me just
There
say
you
that.
go. There you go. Well, as I've told some people, last week I was where they was in a town in Northern Virginia, river that feeds into the Potomac, and the lady in the town there said, "Well, back when the Yankees invaded," and it rolled off her tongue like it was just the colloquial phrase, "when the Yankees invaded."
Well, we appreciate you here back in Washington, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Just
well,
make sure you know that.
I know.
Even though you're a Yankee.
Yeah. Oh, she was kind. It wasn't about that. It was.
Yeah, okay. Good.
It was.
Good
Hi,
morning,
everyone.
Christine.
Good morning. How's
And
it
I saw
going?
Mike, right? Mike's all there.
There he is.
Good morning.
Good morning, team.
Hey.
So it's 8 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call the Whatcom County Public Utility District 1 meeting to order. Thank you all for your attendance. We have a special meeting today. So our agenda is very simple. We're going to go through the formalities opening the meeting, and then I'm going to hand the mic over to Jim Darling, who's going to lead us through a process to further hone our initiatives for 2022 and to discuss the general manager recruitment process. So go ahead, Steve.
Commissioner, I think that we do have public comment opportunity on the agenda, so I would suggest you do that before you turn it over to Jim.
Right. Thank you for that clarification, Steve. And actually, there's two public comments. One before Jim's presentation, and then one after Jim's presentation and facilitated discussion. Thank you for that clarification, Steve. So with that, Christine, would you like to do the Pledge of Allegiance today, or no? Did I'm putting you on the spot?
I think I can do it. Let's all join together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Woohoo! Great. So with that, let's check to see if we have public comment this morning. Now, Anne, could you facilitate that for us?
Looks like no public comment.
Okay, then we go ahead and close the public comment period. Hopefully we'll get some at the end of the meeting. Jim, the ball is yours.
Hey, thank you, Commission. And I don't think we'll need as much time as we allocated on the schedule for today. And so I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'll share here in a second just to help lead us through the discussion. And just as a little bit of an update, I've coordinated with Prothman. John Sitkin helped facilitate that. And a fellow named Bill McDonald is going to be the lead for Prothman in the recruitment. Bill and I talked yesterday at length, and he understands the schedule. And as we go through this, then we can talk about next steps. And he's totally on board with that. So Ann.
And I think in response to Commissioner Grant's requests at the last meeting, we're going to see if he can be available at your next commission meeting on the 27th.
And he can be. He's going to be there. So I've asked Ann. I think Ann got my note already to share the invite with him. So that's good. So he'll be there. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There, can you see that?
No.
No.
Okay. Let me try that again. Not now.
Yes.
Okay, good. It worked. So I will lead the discussion, and I think it'd be good for us at this point to keep this conversational. And I don't have many slides, but I've got a few to help lead that discussion. Of course, just as a reminder, the reason we're here is to successfully navigate the transition to a new general manager. And I think the operative word here is successfully now. Successfully. So I think everybody's committed to that, and I certainly appreciate all the work that the commission's put in on this. In terms of the transition, I thought I wanted to remind everybody and walk through, and using this Gantt chart format, of the steps that we're going through and put some time sense to it. So the goal here is to have a new general manager on board sometime in early 22 as possible. That's our goal. To do that, the general management recruitment that Prothman's going to undertake is going to start about now, and they're committed to that schedule. And I confirmed with them yesterday that if we started about now, in the next week or two, that they could have candidates for the commission by the end of the year. Just a reminder and a cautionary note, the market is very tight right now in terms of finding new employees, as the PUD knows. So if everything goes fine, this is the schedule we'll be on. So in order to do that, to prepare for the recruitment, the commission is going to be asked to, as you have been before, to adopt the job profile, a job description, the initiatives 2021, which include a couple special projects, and then the compensation package. And Bill and I chatted last night about this, and we're going to make every effort to have all those final documents to you for discussion on the 27th. So that's the goal. And so today, we're going to talk about these a little bit today, still in draft, but make sure you're okay with them. And then moving forward to have those finalized on the 27th. So what we have is we have a number of ongoing initiatives. There were 5 that we have been discussing that start now. They're ongoing. They'll go well into the future. The broadband vision partnership with the port, customer service in the industrial customer base, the technical support of the water associations, continuing to work on the local water resource issue, and the PUD is the go-to resource for utility issues, where things that we had discussed temporarily is happening now and going forward. And then at some point in 2022, and this is movable, that the PUD would also focus on clean and renewable energy, Water supply, I use this non-stream delivery. I'm not sure that's the right technical term, but I think you know what it is. It's about pipe water to the ag community and that type of thing. And attracting green industry to Cherry Point, perhaps in a partnership with the county and or port. So those are initiatives. So these are sort of the temporal priorities of these, from what I understand from the commission. In addition, we talked about doing sometime next year, doing a strategic plan update, a full update when the new GM is on board, which would incorporate these initiatives and other things that arise. And we also talked about the possibility of doing a community impact analysis next year. What impact has PUD had on the community historically, now, and going forward? And I think it's a great baseline gauge to evaluate initiatives, priorities in the future, having that baseline. So in order to do all of this, we had discussed having, starting now or soon after now, routine staff updates to help the leads bring back to the commission further discussion on the ongoing initiatives. You know, you're going to get closer to the strategic plan update and that type of thing. And so to really beef up those staff updates at the commission meetings. And you will be preparing your 2022 budget this fall. And so all of these things that we've listed here to do are going to have fiscal considerations for the most part. And we're going to go over those in a second. And the other thing too is that we had talked about developing strategies for each of these initiatives. That's going to be an ongoing thing. You know, the option to that would be to hold up the recruitment process, get all of these strategies sorted out, but I think we can do two things at once here and track these independently. So, and that's part of those routine staff updates and discussion with the commission about what strategies will we have for each of these initiatives. So I don't know if there are any comments on that, if that makes sense to the commission, and Steve, to you. This seems like the temporal perspective over time, what we've talked about doing, so if that makes sense.
So are there any comments or questions right now from the commission? I have one. Christine or Mike, would like to go first?
Go ahead, Atul.
So my question is just about the initiatives, the breaking up between the ongoing and FY 2020 and beyond initiatives. I like what you've done here about creating two categories. I just wanted to check in with the commission because I don't think it's something we formally agreed to at our last meeting, and I just want to make sure everybody also finds that helpful.
Do you just mean, Atul, in terms of the timing for when they start?
There's a little bit of an implication that the ongoing initiatives, Jim, to me, and maybe I'm misreading it, are at the higher priority, because one of the things we talked about is what's the priorities, right?
Right.
So I'm getting the feeling that the FY 2022 and beyond initiatives are a slightly lower priority to the ongoing initiatives category. Is that your intent, or?
No, except that, you know, they take resources, they take staff resources, and you have to manage the resources. I mean, ideally, you do them all right now and take off. We're just trying to allocate and being realistic about when they could really get launched. And I think some of these ones, particularly the clean and renewable energy and the green industry, are some things that you may want to launch after you have a new GM and on board and go forward. So it's not intended to be the ongoing or more important than the 22 and beyond, except that we're just being realistic about the timing and the use of resources going forward.
There's one subtle point. Sorry, go ahead, Christine.
No, go ahead.
There's one subtle point about the clean and renewable energy, and perhaps Steve or Brian could speak to this too, and that is that we are looking at power supply arrangements that require additional power than our existing BPA allotment. And so to meet those, meet that allotment means that we would have to quite likely secure small chunks of, relatively small chunks of energy, in the tens of megawatts. But those would quite likely come from a renewable project. So I don't know if that falls under customer service or what, but there's a piece of that that's definitely an ongoing initiative because it's like pertinent this year.
Yeah. Well, we could move that one up to the ongoing initiatives if you like. We could put them all in the one box that they're all ongoing if we want. I mean, it's just, I think.
I'm not suggesting that. Maybe I'd like to get other people's input on maybe how to keep what you're doing here and then just be aware of that point.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit hard to put all of these things in neat boxes because some of what we also have to do is be, responsive to opportunities and like you said, Atul, with having to bring, we know we need more power supply. And so we're working on that right now. So, but I think to me, we are understaffed for what this commission wants to do. And we have not been successful at staffing up. And I know it's really hard to recruit right now, but to me, I see us building our team in order to get these initiatives done as one of the most critical things that we need to keep doing with the remainder of 2021. And certainly a characteristic of the new GM would need to be the ability to recruit and build our team so that we can really dig into more of these, both ongoing, but it does feel like with the 2022 and beyond initiatives, particularly, well, really all three of them, we just don't have the staff to do those things right now, is my feeling that I'm getting from talking to Steve.
Commissioner Grant, and I totally agree with your comments and concerns about staffing. I mean, even if we ignore those three in 2022 and beyond, we don't have sufficient staff to manage the ongoing initiatives. And even if we were not looking at transitioning a new GM, we've got other staff positions that we know we're going to need to transition, looking at retirements over the next couple of years. Just status quo, if you would. Staffing is a key issue. The other thing that I would say is that I appreciate having, that line item on developing strategies for initiatives starting now, but it's going to be very difficult and it'll be a challenge. We'll get there. I'm assuring you all that, but as we start building the 2022 budget and we start the GM recruitment, we're building a budget and developing strategies that new GM will pick up when he or she steps in the office. And so it's going to be a real challenging process for current staff to develop, quote, those strategies that new GM will be looked to implement. So just throwing that out there.
And we're in the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about some of the details and Steve and I did some estimates on some of the out-of-pocket expenses that you might have to pursue these. So, and I'm going to caution you that they're estimates at this point, and that's part of the budget process. So, well, I'm going to end on this slide too when we get to the end. So we can come back to this discussion. Maybe we go through all the slides and then I've got this one at the very end again. Is that okay, Commission?
Yes, I just wanted to have this discussion and Jim, so I don't think anybody's asking for any specific changes here. based on the discussion, but I just appreciated the discussion. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question before we move on? Related to the GM recruitment from, basically now through December. So thank you for, I'm glad Prothman will be joining us on the 27th. And I guess this is more of a request than a question. I would love to really get like the breakdown from them of exactly what's happening or what they hope to see happen over those next 5 months in a lot more detail. So we really understand what's coming at us, if that's possible, Jim.
Sure.
And John.
Are you expecting a schedule and action steps from them?
What was that, John?
Are you thinking of a schedule with action steps?
Yeah,
Kind of
I
a
think a
chart?
schedule with action steps, a description of how they typically do. Like, there's a lot of different philosophies about how interviewing is done. I've never done an interview process with, a public commission, how we do interviewing with the public open meetings and, so I think kind of giving us an overview of what to expect over the next few months, what our role can be, helping with recruitment, any legal things that we should know about in terms of how we recruit and hire. All of that would be really useful for me. I don't know how the other commissioners feel, but.
John, perhaps.
Jim, why don't you and I try to set up a phone call with Prothman later this week?
Right, exactly. Okay, so moving on, what we wanted to talk a little bit about is these balancing the resources. And remember, the initiatives are in green from the previous chart, and the special projects are those two things that are in sort of this reddish color. So what we had starting initially was the broadband vision, customer service, technical support, local water resources, and the PUD as a resource on utilities. And then we have the three initiatives for 2022, and then those two special projects, the strategic plan and the community impact analysis. I'm prepared to go through and talk about each one of these in terms of estimated budget and the lead. And as I said, Steve and I tuned that up last week. But are there any, and I've got descriptors here of these. I think they're fairly consistent with what we've discussed in the past. I don't know if the commission wants to walk through each one, or I think we're fairly settled on these. There might be some tweaking of the language. But generally, do they capture? I want to be mindful of your time here.
Go ahead, Atul.
Please go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I feel pretty. I feel like we've walked through these a few times now. In taking some time to reflect on these and what we might be missing, the thing that has come back a few times for me that I wanted to have a discussion with the commission about was our stance on climate change and what role we want to take in our community trying to forward bold climate solutions, and whether we feel like we have articulated the vision that the three of us have about what our PUD could be doing to try to reduce carbon emissions in Whatcom County. So I think I would just be, I guess I think it's more of a question to both of you, Mike and Atul, of whether you both feel what you think about how we should articulate our vision for the role that the PUD plays in combating climate change.
Well, that's a bold one, and I appreciate the question. And So, for me, I'm recognizing that the organization that I was elected to in 2018, in that first holiday banquet, had a presentation on the subject of climate change, and it was a big step. Even to discuss the subject at the PUD was a big step. We had taken an agnostic position on the subject for most of the history of the PUD. So I appreciate your challenge. It's something that I would like to suggest that we pay attention to in some depth. But I think it's reflected in two ways in the PUD's actions to date. And one is a lot of what the PUD does on water could be described as resiliency.
Mhm.
And resiliency is adaptation.
Mhm.
And switching only for myself, I am increasingly worried that we need to pay more attention to adaptation and resiliency, and not less attention to mitigation, but just recognizing the fact that the rest of the world is doing things that there's not a lot we can do about.
Mhm.
So the PUD is very well situated to focus on resiliency and adaptation. In fact, that's what it's been doing for the last many years.
Right.
So it's kind of in there, one could argue by accident or because we're just paying attention in a way that maybe high level policy statements don't necessarily deliver on.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think a lot of even if you look back on the history of PUDs, I mean, it's all about conservation and using our resources, stewarding resources, and for the benefit of the public. And so, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's in there. I just don't think we explicitly say it. And it's really more of a question to the two of you about, what policy statement we think we should make, or do we just continue with these initiatives and sort of say these are all about climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency.
Or Commissioner, sorry for interrupting, but
Oh.
also the theme of your strategic plan update in next year is, taking a step back at your mission and why the PUD exists, and incorporate that into that wholesale update is one way to do that.
The only, well, actually, Mike, do you want to share anything on this?
Well, I was going to say that everything that we talk about is, to me, a high priority. In fact, I have trouble putting a 1, 2, 3 because I think they're all number ones. But I also have to keep coming back to what we're really trying to do, and we're trying to find someone to fill the shoes of Steve. And without knowing who that person is, they may not even know anything about Whatcom County, our customers, our staff, our community, our desires as commissioners.
Mhm.
And I don't know how much we can put on them or on that person. And if we feel that something's more important, then maybe we better take something off the original and place it. Climate is an important issue. How to address it without staff, without a budget, and a new general manager is very difficult for me to try to figure it out. But I do agree it's important. I don't know if it's a statement we make for an educational, or do we put something behind it, staff and money or budget? I don't really know at this time.
That's a good thought, if I could latch onto that, Commissioner Murphy. And that's that there perhaps is a statement we could put out just to make sure that the community knows that it's something that the commissioners are aware of, on top of, and tracking. And it's reflected in our actions already. So
So two thoughts. One, I had a very preliminary discussion with someone that is the kind of person that might apply for this position, just to get out there and start talking to folks. And this person, the first thing they said was, oh yeah, I want to see your strategic initiatives. Job description wasn't interesting. Just what's your strategic vision for this organization, which I thought was interesting. But, I think that one way, I like what you said, Atul, about, maybe kind of having some sort of memo or communication that goes with our initiatives. I think that one thing that we might also want to think about is the fact that being an organization that is committed to climate mitigation, resiliency, adaptation, I think a lot of people that are looking at jobs in the public sector are looking for sort of mission-driven work, right? And so I think there's a possibility that articulating what we're doing in terms of climate might help attract some candidates. I don't know for sure, but I do think that it's possible that whether it's as part of our strategic initiatives or as part of the job description, that maybe a letter from our commission, with all three commissioners signing the letter, sort of saying, this is what we're about. This is what we hope to do. I don't know that. I mean, I know that that's kind of what all of this is, but I just, to me over the weekend, I just have been thinking a lot about climate change and the need for local leadership, really leadership at all levels, and just wanting to make sure we all felt good about kind of where we stand on that with these initiatives.
So if you're comfortable with that, on what I'm about to propose something, and that's that maybe I'll endeavor to write something along the lines of what I stated verbally in a communication to Jim and Steve, and then we can hone something to review it at a future commission meeting with some urgency, recognizing that this may be something that we use as part of our recruitment package.
In commission, the other thing you could do is that could be part of the introduction to the piece on initiatives. Right? You could maybe think about that. You might wrap it into one, think about it as a handout almost. It's one communication piece. It has the introduction, that has that entry or that introduction about climate change, and then the initiative. So that's one way to think about it. Might be.
Yeah, I think in the last update, didn't Jeff McClure write a letter that introduced the initiatives, and then there were, so I mean that maybe that's, well, long story short, I think that would be great, Atul, if you want to draft something and then we can review it and contribute to it. It's just, I just wanted to get this off my chest because it's what I was thinking about over the weekend. So I think that that sounds like a good pathway forward.
Well, and I wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because it's impossible to live in the circumstances we're living in right now and not notice that a lot of people are paying attention and looking at things through this lens. So thanks for bringing it up.
Of course.
Okay, if we're, I think, ready to move on, then I just want to caution you before we go to the next slide. You're going to see some of the numbers that these were. I just want to caution you, these are very preliminary estimates. Steve and I independently put our heads together around them, so I just bear that in mind. So for the each of the initiatives or the projects that we've discussed, Steve has gone through and updated who the lead might be and when the launch is. And that goes back to our conversation earlier about, are these current ones, what's the priority? So maybe that column is not as important. And then we have the estimated budget implication for next year. You'll obviously have some for this year. And this last column on the far right is something that you'll be discussing during your budget deliberations in the fall. But thought it was important to get kind of a sense of what we're thinking about. And there's not a lot of work behind this. There's not a lot of research or detail. It's just a rough estimate at this point. But you can see for the broadband vision that either the assistant GM or contract staff would be the lead. Might be some funds required for additional staff or a consultant on call to implement the work with the port. Customer service, that's reaching out to your industrial customer base, is the GM would be the lead, and that is staff time and maybe even commission time. Technical support would be either a contract service representative or the water resource lead and the staff. And there is the existing contract extension that you've done very successfully for the last 3 years in helping out the water associations. I think that's up a little bit from what you've been spending. I think it's been 38, the new estimate is 50. Local water resources, this is a tough one too. It'd be the local water resource staff to be determined further, and may need some dollars for additional staff resources by contract. That just speaks to the fact that you're having a hard time hiring full-time employees. The PUD is a resource. That one's got less definition behind it. And then the commission updates that are ongoing to help develop further strategies to do this budget work are mainly staff time and existing staff. So that's a sense of order of magnitude. And I would not focus too much on the estimated budget implications at this point, because that'll be, as I said, part of your budget deliberations in the fall. If you look at going forward, then the clean and renewable energy, and I appreciate the fact that that's ongoing now. Well, but the assistant GM would be assigned that, and there may be some contract services to help lead that. And there's a preliminary budget of $75,000. The water supply issue, this is the non-stream conveyance. The GM and the water resource staff would work on that, and we assume there would be an ecology grant, and there'd be some local match for that ecology grant. You know, depending on what the grant program is, ecology's got a whole bunch of different match requirements for different grant programs. Green industry at Cherry Point, this would be the assistant GM once again, and the sense is there might be a feasibility and market analysis report done to help jumpstart that. The strategic plan update and the impact study are both would be led by the new GM, and these are my estimates on the strategic plan. I think the last update, Steve, refresh my memory, but I think it was 20 to 25, maybe mid-20s to do that. I'm sensing that you want a more robust process and may even have additional public input on the next update. And then the impact study really is that number of 50,000 really is a placeholder, because it depends how in depth you want to go. I mean, you could do one for $10,000. You could do one for 100,000. So it's really a placeholder. So those are starting to put some detail to these ideas. And as Steve mentioned earlier, you know, it takes staff time, resources are limited, you're looking for staff. But I think it's important for the commission to appreciate, and I know you do, that all of these things take resources, either staff time or money out of pocket to do them. So this would be the challenge during the budget preparation in the fall.
Jim, sorry, go ahead.
I just, Jim, thanks for that. And you know, some of these, like the strategic plan update, the impact study, you know, and even the green industry Cherry Point. And I think on the previous slide, there was a couple, it's fairly easy to to identify at least a starting number, because like the technical support also is that, it's pretty easy for us to define what that means today. So, contract for services, hiring a consultant to do an impact study. We can come up with some pretty legitimate, I think, numbers right today, but when we get into like the water supply and previous slide, if you go back again to the previous slide, like the local water resources, I mean, that's such a broad group of, if you would, of different work that we do today and what we think that should look like, going into 2022. It's really difficult to put any kind of number on it. And so these numbers that we put in, are really just, okay, order of magnitude. What do we think this means if we were to start tomorrow and start putting some of these together? So.
Yeah, it's sort of the reality of public policy, right?
Right, and so, Jim, I have a comment. I always want to check with the other commissioners. Are there any other comments on these resource slides? Okay, so my comment, go ahead.
Oh, I just was gonna, Steve, it makes sense. I mean, without having really detailed strategies, of course, we don't have detailed budget numbers, like PUD as a resource. It's so appreciate the starting point, but understand why having more detailed strategies would help with more detailed budgeting.
Yep.
I have a comment about the impact study initiative or project. I guess we call it a project. So I've been thinking a little bit about that, and I've been wondering if we what the goals of that are, and I'm thinking that it's to create community engagement, and as one goal, and secondly, for the commissioners to understand where we touch the community too, education for the commission too. Is that correct?
From my perspective, that is correct. That with public agencies that traffic in the private marketplace like you do, in utilities, or, port authorities do it in real estate is a good example. Or if you take not-for-profits like St. Joe's Hospital in Bellingham, they are in the private industry, healthcare industry. They're a not-for-profit. They're not dissimilar to the PUD or the port in that sense. And one of the things that happens is that you need to balance mission versus margin. And that's always a tough one. You wrestle with it at the PUD Commission of balancing your mission to serve the community, the environment, being responsible, with the fact that you're running something that runs on economic terms. So I think these impact studies, they can be typically monetized, which I don't think does the right job, to look at the economic impacts, number of jobs produced, taxes generated from your investment. But there's this other element of mission. Are you serving the mission? And so that, I think, Commissioner, that's correct, that part of that is engaging with the community to see what impact your mission is having on the environment, the community. At the same time, to look at the quantifiable things like the monetary impacts, fiscal impacts. So they're a little bit different than a true economic impact study. And this one would take some time to sort out a scope of work, and that's going to affect that, obviously, the cost.
So I attended a session at WPUDA in the Commissioner Education Roundtable, which I sent an email out about. And one of the things that was discussed there was this, certainly over the last decade, a big fad in business. And I shouldn't call it a fad because I actually support it. So I didn't mean to be minimizing it at all. And that is the concept of KPI, or key performance indicators. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if aspects of community accountability and to customers, as well as the citizenry of Whatcom County, if there's a way to, as part of this impact study, incorporate concepts from that and helps begin the process, start developing accountability metrics for the PUD.
Absolutely. I just am coming off a team that has developed a rather significant effort to develop a strategic plan for the Port of Tacoma. The Port of Tacoma and the Port of Seattle combined their shipping facilities so they would work as one entity and not compete with each other. And so the Port of Tacoma engaged a team. I was on it to say, okay, so when the shipping moves over, what does the Port of Tacoma do? What's our mission? And it was a very a discussion at the core of why they exist. But coming out of that, Commissioner, you're right. They have developed some key performance indicators that they're going to measure their performance and their goals and priorities. So it's very common. And some of those are financial, they're quantifiable, right? They're margin. A lot of those are mission driven. And it's a little bit of a challenge to quantify key performance indicators on the mission side, but it's doable.
Well, and I just wanted to offer that, and obviously for future discussion. I just feel like this particular item, impact study, maybe deserves an asterisk of some kind because it's very much in formulation. Because it's a great thing for you to identify it as an opportunity for us, but what it actually means, I think we need to let the commission digest it a little bit.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that I really like that idea of developing KPIs or benchmarks that we can use to really have metrics to evaluate our performance from year to year. And so would welcome a longer discussion about how we do that as part of the impact study. Thanks for bringing it up.
Really, wouldn't development of the impact study what you want to look at in terms of and how to measure the effectiveness of the PUD doing, I'll just say it this way, doing the community's business? Wouldn't that be the outcome of that strategic plan update where you listen to the community and then you set, your goals and your vision, and then you decide how you're going to measure the success of the PUD in meeting those goals that you've heard from the community in a process that you feel was effective in terms of getting input, getting community engagement, and then, then set the metrics as to how you're going to measure success and hold the commission and the PUD accountable to the community. I think that would be the way to establish that impact study. What you're going to measure, what you're going to gauge, because I think that as I think that all this discussion that you've held over the last few months is really reflective of what the PUD was for the community over the last 75 to 80 years, may be different than what the community wants the PUD to be in the future. And so having a very thorough engagement with the community on setting that, that update to the strategic plan next year, and then deciding, okay, here's what we heard from the community, and how are we going to measure that success? How are you going to measure, the success of your staff and the new GM?
And I think that's right, Steve. And I think that's why you want to do them in that order, the strategic plan first and then the impact study. And it would be a baseline study, right, that you might repeat in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road to see what's our progress been like.
Yeah, I think that also, Commissioner Grant, brought up the climate impact. That can be, what, as you just talked about, Jim and commissioners, historically, if we look at a, impact study, we typically look at the, the economic impacts, jobs, dollars in the community, that kind of a thing. But if you're broadening your vision and your mission to look at how all of the work that you as a PUD or that we as a PUD do, how it ties into your vision on working in that environment of mediating and looking at how and what we do, how it fits into the global climate impact work, then that measurement, that impact study takes on a whole different meaning. It's not just jobs and dollars, and so.
Should I move on, Commissioner?
Yes, please.
Okay, so next we want to talk about the general manager profile. I think the commission has seen the two pieces of that. One is the general manager profile itself, and the other one is the product from that, which is the general manager job description. And that, as you know, and you've seen, we formulated that into the standard format that the PUD has used. I think the general manager profile is something that's a communication piece from the commission to the candidates, very much similar to what you're discussing about your feelings on climate change. And then the general manager job description is a little bit more of a technical document. So with that in mind, I wanted to go through the general manager profile. And you've seen this before. These are rough in the sense that they have not been cleaned up. There's been no graphic overlay on them. They've not been formatted, but this is consistent with what we discussed before and that we sent out to the commission last week. And just very briefly, the high points are the strengths of the next manager will include being a reasoned risk taker with a sense of entrepreneurship and vision, having the skills to understand and integrate and care for this community, prioritize relationship building both in the private and public sectors, seeking solutions to complex challenges, more than just identifying, but seeking solutions when you have limited resources, leading an organization in transition because of the change with the GM position, and we have new commissioners, and having a really good solid understanding of organizational development to advance your goals and priorities. So those were some of the strengths. Keep in mind in the job description, we repeat these and they're a little bit more in the vein of a job description than this profile statement. The skills that we have discussed is making sure that the general manager has a skill to understand the role of management and working with an elected board and executing their consensus vision. Which this next one, which I thought was really good, was a judgment to make technical discernments on complex technologies, financial analysis, and risk assessments, because you'll recall in our job experience and education, you are not necessarily limiting this to people with a technical background. You want to, if somebody could come in and had the judgment and the skill to do technical discernments, then that was good, and that's what you really need. Obviously, the ability to lead, hire, develop, and retain a professional staff, retaining the best of the best in key staff positions, strong part of the skill set. An appreciation for the value of good customer service and community responsiveness. The ability to effectively communicate with all kinds of audiences, one person, phone call, Rotary Club, industry conference, in a host of settings. And working knowledge of complex financial conditions and the vision to be creative and leveraging resources. Doesn't mean they need to be a finance person, but they've got to be able to traffic in that arena, so to speak. And then, okay.
Are you, Jim, I have a little bit of a wordsmithing comment. Would you like me to do that offline or bring it up now?
Well, no, bring it up now. So we'll see if, yeah, sure.
Okay, so the word judgment and discernment is a little bit redundant. So I would suggest having the discernments to assess complex technologies, finances, and risk. Because assessment and judgment is also redundant, and analysis and judgment is also a little bit redundant. So I'm just suggesting
Okay.
there's some redundancies in the words between judgment, discernments, and assessments, and so
Okay.
on.
We'll do on all of these is we will.
Yeah, sorry to nitpick, Jim.
Oh, that's okay. It's all right. It's good. It's a good point. So what we'll do is, we have it in a Word document, and I'll send these back after the meeting today for your packets for your discussion for next week, for the 27th. And you'll have another bite at the apple then if you get them and you think, oh, I didn't get it right on this particular one, or there's another one. You got plenty of time to do that. And then the last slide about this, you're seeking the right candidate and consider a combination of experience and education. Minimally, however, should include a 4-year degree in a technical, managerial, or administrative field. And the consensus was 10 years of senior management experience. We had some discussion, should be less than that, but also keep in mind in the job description, as well as in the profile, there's a statement that the commission can waive these. You're not locked into these in your judgment as a group. You find somebody that has a degree in agriculture, I'm just making that up, but they've got the right skill set, or they have 5 years experience or 7 years, you always have the right to, to modify that if that's the right candidate. So I'll work with Prothman to make sure that language and with John is in both the profile that you publish and the job description. And then finally, this is the format. I think we sent this out too. It's a draft for the general manager. This is the format the PUD uses. And we're developing that in concert with Prothman and Bill McDonald, as I mentioned, and he's working on that this week. And for your commission meeting next week, the goal is to have the profile with any changes you might have as a draft, and the manager job description as an updated draft after they review it. The compensation package and the initiatives all for you next week to review, and if you're so inclined to move forward. Knowing that this draft that I prepared was based on the profile and I sent it to Prothman, it included a review of 6 or 7 other GM positions around the state. And I picked things that I thought were appropriate. I put them into this job description that were complementary of where you're going with the profile. But we need to have Prothman look at that one more time and make sure that that's correct. And it has all the standard language about making accommodations for folks with disabilities and that type of thing. That'll be in the job description. So any questions on the profile and the other changes that, other than this one about the discernments and the judgment that we need to make before on the next draft before it goes back to you?
I have a comment, but I want to hear from the other commissioners first if there's comments or questions. Okay, then I want to bring up, Jim, something to really ask you, and then ask you how it's from your experience, and maybe to bring up with Prothman as well, how this is being reflected. And the subject I want to bring up is the concept of 360 evaluations, which also applies to recruitment. And what I mean by 360, it's there was a movement a couple of decades ago about recognizing when you're working that you're not just working as a subordinate, or in the case of a general manager, you're not just reporting to the commission. You have ideally a sense of accountability to your staff and to your peers in the industry. So to what extent are we taking a 360 view in the development of the profile and description? To what extent are we checking with staff and what they want out of a general manager? I'm not saying that should be the primary or the dominant accountability. Dominant accountability is, of course, to the commission. But having said that, I am curious and also value where staff are on the subject. Who are the people that are peers to our general manager? And what input do they have? For example, one obvious example would be the Port of Bellingham. What input? Again, it's not dominant input, but it is something that potentially matters in our working relationships, to have input from people who are peers to our general manager. And what's your thoughts about that? And I'm not stuck on any idea here, Jim, but it's something that I've been exposed to over the years, and I wanted to know your thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, so two things. One, in developing the job description, let's tackle that first in the profile. So I did interview a number of key staff members about what they wanted to see, the qualities and skills they wanted to see in a GM, right on down to the specifics of what kind of education should they have, what kind of experience and background should they have. Well, I think we did that, and we incorporated that, got baked into both the profile and the job description. However, it might be wise to have Steve take these rough documents and go back with the staff in the next week and chat with them about it and make sure we didn't miss anything. It's always a judgment call for me as the facilitator on finding consensus through a series of independent interviews, right? So maybe that's something Steve should do with the staff between now and next Tuesday. In terms of the selection process itself, I will raise this issue with Prothman, but we have had a discussion. I talked to Bill yesterday at length about this, that the commission feels strongly, and the staff felt strongly too in the interviews, that the staff participate in the selection process in one fashion or another. Commissioner Murphy mentioned it'd be nice to have a reception or something that was a little bit more casual with the staff, where they could really relax, have no commissioners there. You know, they can really talk to the candidates frankly and candidly. And so
That's a great idea. Yeah.
During the selection process. And you know, you can do it during tours. They're going to want to tour facilities. You could do it there, but I think that's a tremendous idea in the selection process. And for them to provide their feedback, you'll have to organize how that happens, but probably through Steve to the commission. I think that is, my experience has been as a local government official that's been key and critical for all the hires I've done in my career, have staff engaged. Then the evaluation going forward down the road, I think that's something that you can put into motion with your new GM as you go down that road and evaluating the GM and all the staff for that matter. I think it's a good idea. I like these moving up the organization evaluations and getting feedback from the troops on how the GM and the senior staff people are doing. Sometimes the most valuable input you get, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jim.
I have a question too. Well, and I just want to reiterate, yeah, I think getting the staff involved in the ways that you described sounds great, but a tool, you also mentioned, you know, how do we involve other, you know, kind of peers, like port leadership you mentioned. And I guess that does also bring me to a question for Prothman that relates back to the interview and selection process of how do we get the community engaged? And, you know, I've seen different models over the last few years for how this is done. I think I've mentioned that, you know, WTA did a public Zoom event with their top 3 candidates and introduced those candidates to the community. And I actually didn't participate, so I don't know if there was a Q&A, but I thought that was interesting. It was really transparent, really, I was impressed with that. So I guess I would love to get some recommendations from Prothman about how we engage either our partners or the community in the selection process. So there's, you know, ownership in the decision beyond just the commission.
Yeah, you're right. There are a number of models if you want to do that. And I can ask Bill to bring those back to you and how you want to do that. So it's fairly common for public officials to do that.
Hey, Jim, can I, or all two, Christine, can I step in?
Please.
One thing that I've learned about hiring people is there's no way you can actually put down every word to cover everything that needs to be discussed to find the right person. As I look at everything that we're drafting up now, a salary and everything else that goes with it, benefits, is going to be the driving force. So the more we need to have some room in there, because right now when I see everything we write in there, I have no idea what kind of salary to bring someone interest into our community. I think we're going to be shocked at what we may have to pay for the quality of person we want. But that's fine, write everything up front. I think it's important to do that. But when it comes to community, I've sat and listened where they brought all the candidates, set them up front and let the community come and interview them. And pretty soon I found the candidates feeding off of each other, almost like I'm better than you, I answer this better, I meant to say this, and I didn't find it to be very successful. I think it's better with the one-on-one or the small group and not the community. My belief is if we can find someone that can be a leader, work with the staff that we have, which is incredible people, and work with our customers, I think we're 90% of the way there, making our community happy. We are doing, I think, real good things in the community. And I don't know of allowing every individual to speak on it above staff and our customers is really going to be beneficial to us. It could be more confusing because we're going to hear a lot more and makes the decision harder. Does that make any sense to you?
Commissioner, Jim, just for my perspective on that is, I think it's a mistake to bring in multiple candidates and put them in the same forum. And I had an occasion a number of years ago, I was solicited to apply for a job, public official job, and that was their process. And I pulled out of the process because I just wasn't going to participate. Now it's a little bit different to doing, one person at a time, but that's a lot more expensive, a lot more time consuming. I've seen that process where somebody would come in, there'd be a reception with one candidate, that when you're down to the select few, and you bring in some other folks from around the community, and it's more of as you and I talked about with the employees, that too is also a very informal discussion to get people's opinions. But I'm not a big fan myself of having like you described, the forum, the panel, everybody up in front. I don't think candidates like it either. And there's always this issue, keep in mind, there's always this ongoing issue. You're a public official somewhere, assuming on the public side or you're private, and you're applying for a job, there's a sense of some folks want a little bit of discretion there. So their current employer doesn't say, whoa, wait a minute, private or public. So that's always kind of a balancing act too. So.
And Jim, excuse me, also, Jim, you've had the background of both private and public. And I see a big difference between someone with a background of serving private compared to serving public. And I don't know if it would be wise to offer both. And if we shouldn't focus more on someone with background in public serving. But what's your thoughts of that? Because they're really different. They're not apples compared to apples. It's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Serving the public and private.
It's interesting. It's always the question that all public agencies wrestle with. I think you might be better off keeping it looser in the sense that you will consider any candidate private or public, and then you make the discernment about their skills. And I've seen just recently, I helped the Port Authority retain a new executive director who came from 100% the private manufacturing sector. but they had the right skills and personality to run this board, and they did very, very well. They went through a lot of training, you know, on public issues, but did very, very well. So I guess, Commissioner, I would keep it open for both is my advice. And then you put the filter on the candidate's individual skills and you think they can do the job. So,
And I hear what you're saying, Jim, but then you also mentioned the word training. I have seen that where if you had someone with the right background, say from the public, maybe within a year, they're up to speed. But with someone coming back from a different background, I've seen up to 3 years grace period given to make sure you train them right so that they could take over. I don't know if we have 3 years or 2 years to give to wait, because I think we got some pretty hot issues that we need to have someone come in experienced to be able to take over. And I think the public background is very important.
that's that's the trade-off. You're exactly right. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. That's the trade-off. They hit the ground running because they got public experience, or they have private experienced person that could get up to speed fast and move the agenda along. That's always the risk. The only thing I would caution you on is if you say we will not take any application from somebody that doesn't have a public background, you may miss some pretty good candidates, you know, but you're right. That's the slippery slope that you're on.
So I want to make sure I'm also internalizing Commissioner Murphy, your input on this subject. I see one similarity between this comment and the comment you made just before that. And I feel like what you're trying to really make sure we don't lose track of is sticking to the fundamentals of what the PUD is doing and operational excellence. Am I hearing you correctly? And the focus on someone with public experience, someone who you know, not bringing too many factors into the equations, potentially lose sight of the fundamentals. Is that, am I hearing you right on that?
Who we are and where we've been, if that's important to us as the commissioners, and if the staff is with us, I think we can travel down any pathway. But right now, I think what we've created with Steve's leadership and staff, if you're satisfied with it, then I think we need to consider that and stick with that, even though we have changes to be made in the future. There's other things we need to deal with, but I don't know if you're saying we got to reinvent the whole wheel, so to speak. And so I'm pleased with where Steve has taken us. I am pleased with the staff and the relationship with our community. I know there's areas that I need to improve on that will hopefully make me a better server of the community, and I'm planning on doing that. But unless you two are telling me something differently, you know, I would like us to kind of narrow it in and focus. Is that kind of answering your question, O'Toole?
Yeah, it is. And I just want to take a quick moment to say how much I appreciate what we do as commissioners together. You know, like I brought up this 360 issue and you brought up focus. And I think it's a wonderful way of looking at this from two unique and both equally valid perspectives. And the truth is always somewhere in between as far as the best path forward. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood you, and I think I do. So thanks for that.
Can I close the loop on something too with the community engagement topic that I brought up? You know, I just wanted to say, Mike, that I also appreciate your perspective on that. And I think I want to just make sure that we are being transparent about how we're making this decision. And I think we are very transparent in how we conduct our business. So I think what would be helpful to me is maybe if we just if we could let Prothman know that, you know, we want the community to be aware that we're doing this, and and maybe they've done hundreds of recruitments like this. So maybe if they could give us a recommendation for how to keep the community aware of what's going on and engaged, I would really welcome that recommendation from them. If you can mention that to them, Jim and John.
Yep.
Okay.
I would also like to add that our strength comes from our staff as well as our leadership through Steve. I would really look forward to sitting down in some way with our staff to hear what they actually feel and want.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we want to go in a different direction, I'm all for it. If there's things that we need to deal with that are something different, I'm all for it. But if we don't have our staff on board with us, that really makes these things happen. It's easy to say, go do it, but we don't know what the workload's like. And I want to make sure I hear from them saying, it's not going to be possible without extra staff. It's not going to be possible without a bigger budget. I really don't know the answer because honestly, I don't hear from them individually. And it's important to me to know what our team is like. Are we all moving as one, or are we all going in different directions? And I know Steve, I see you there, and you're doing a great job of bringing us always together and keep staff and everybody focused. So I appreciate that. But we all do have our own individual feelings, and each member of our team here is important to me, and I would like to hear from them too sometimes.
Commissioner, if I could, I think the intent of that back on our Gantt chart in the beginning of those staff updates was that was the intended purpose there. So, and at least on the initiatives and the project-based work, not necessarily on the selection.
Commissioners, just a thought also is that as we move through the next 3 to 4 months here in developing strategies, developing budgets around what we see as how to implement those strategies. And as you get through to hopefully adopting a budget sometime late November, early December, I hope that the interaction between staff and commission, not just talking, not just speaking to updates, but speaking to the process of developing that budget, implementing into that budget, the strategic work, if you would, and what our expectations are as to what that means going into 2022, that it'll help you make a better choice on what that general manager looks like. I think that this is, it's really an evolving process here. But over the next few months, I think that hopefully we'll be able to sort of paint a much better picture as to what staff and what you, the commission, and what the community sees as the, picking the right individual to lead the organization.
We had,
Okay, Jimmy, please continue.
okay, so let me just wrap up what we had 3 specific things for John and I to coordinate with Prothman. One was a breakdown on the details of the selection, the timing, the logistics, that type of thing. Number 2 from Prothman is their recommendations on how we engage staff, peers, and the community in the selection process. See what they say about that. Although we've already told them that we want the staff to be engaged for sure. So, but we'll get their recommendation. And then the third thing from Prothman is based on the profile, what's the salary range look like to be competitive for this position, those 3 things. And then I had 2 things I was going to do that we will, if the commissioner can provide me with some idea language about climate change, resiliency and adaptation, we can, if you'd like, work that into the introductory statement about the initiatives and see what that looks like for the commission. And then we have that one, at least that one change on the skill set about discernment and judgment and not being redundant there. So those are the things we'll get done. We'll shoot for getting them done by next week from today. So that's my presentation, and I think we wanted an opportunity for public comment. So is that
Great.
Jim? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. Question for you. How does Prothman go about it? They put out a national search, say they get 40 applicants. What do we as the commissioners finally get to see? 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them?
I think that's something that you want to talk to Bill about next week, specifically about that tradition. Yeah, but you're right. That's the normal process. They would get, maybe they get 30 or 40 applications. Typically what they will do is they will go through and say, 30 of these, we're not even close to the requirements, but they typically will give you a list of those and why they didn't think they should proceed in the process. And then they'll come down to a smaller group of, I don't know what he'll tell us, but 10 or 12 that they might share their credentials with the commission, and then make a joint decision on who you want to bring in to be for the interview process. And it's a pretty interactive and pretty fluid process. You never know where it's going to take you. The recruitment that I would mention I did for a port, which is not what I do for a living, but they asked me to do it a couple of years ago. We probably got 60 applications, and I have to tell you, 30 of them were not even in the ballpark. For example, if they needed to have airport management experience with one of the criteria, I had probably 10 applicants that said they'd flown on a plane. So, it's kind of easy to call those out, but you'll get a core of folks that have really well credentialed, and they'll help you go through that and narrow it down. So we'll ask Bill to walk through that with the commission.
And Commissioner, I just say, if you have any processes that you want to see or further review of, screened out applications, we can arrange for that.
Well, I appreciate that. When Steve was hired, without Steve knowing it, there was eyes on Steve. And we were monitoring Steve. We talked about Steve. We talked to other people. And before Steve ever was interviewed, there was a lot of information gathered about him. I have read a lot of applications. And if an application is nothing more than a three-page resume or application, you can't learn much about that person.
Right.
So to have someone, I do not know Bill, but he and his staff are going to pick certain candidates for us and might miss the one word that means a lot to me on the resume that would stand out to say, I want to see this person instead of something else. So I don't know how that process is going to be worked out. I just want to throw that out there.
If I may offer, Commissioner Murphy, one of the things that we can do is ask for transparency in the pruning process. So if we as a commission choose to go back and just revisit without any problem, without any complexity, we can look for ourselves. That's these days with databases and other tools, it's so easy to access whatever information we want to access. So I think we can ask for that level of transparency as a commission.
Thank you.
Just one other comment, and I know Jim and folks at Prothman have already started talking about, the compensation. And it's going to be important for the commission and Prothman to come together on what that compensation package looks like and what the quote offer is out there, not to the individual, but just generally salary range and so forth, in recognition of, our not being a participant in PERS and how our compensation package reflects that. And because if you are able to, and if you want to attract someone from the public sector with 10 years experience in especially in the state of Washington and engaged in state retirement program, what the advertised salary range is may turn some folks off, or it may attract a lot of people possibly from the private sector with little or no experience in the public sector. So it's really going to make a difference, I think, in terms of who you attract, and making it very clear as to how competitive our compensation package is to other public agencies. That's all. The other is that, we talked about this a little a couple months ago as we were working on attracting folks to some of other positions that we have open. I think that in the last couple of years, the benefits that are now being offered to upper management and executive positions in public sector, especially in the non-traditional, and I'll say non-traditional, smaller cities, possibly even smaller co-ops, PUDs, even if you get to agencies that are much more broad in scope of their work and engagement in the community, and the depth of knowledge that an individual needs to bring to the district, the benefits are starting to increase pretty dramatically in terms of, life insurance, disability insurance, deferred compensation matches that we have not seen, typically in the last 20 years. So.
Thank you for that, Steve.
So I think, Commissioner, you wanted to have some public comment break at this point, and I've got one more slide to wrap it up.
Great. Thank you, Jim, for a great presentation. And all the commission for great feedback. Anne, could you please facilitate public comment and see if we can queue people up?
So far, no one's raised their hand.
Oh, come on, Rick.
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay, sorry, was asleep at the wheel there.
Thank you. We would have missed you.
So a couple of comments, things to bear in mind going forward, mainly around strategic goals for next year. The first is around green energy at Cherry Point. And I know that the Lummi tribe is taking a position which is supported by one of the major political parties in this county, that the ultimate use for Cherry Point is to return it to a natural state as part of a plan to support the herring fishery off of the coast, which in turn supports salmon. So it's something to think about, is whether or not you can actually do anything going forward out at Cherry Point, and maybe the location of your support will have to be somewhere else. Regarding renewable energy, the customers that you have and the ones that you are looking at having to serve have loads that are very much different than the supply from renewable energy. And so, I mean, the loads tend to be flat blocks, and renewable energy is anything but. it's highly diurnal in its supply. The thing that you want to all make sure of in here is that whatever you have for supply to supply these loads is something that is shaped properly. And you want to make sure also that if somebody else is doing the shaping for you, that there isn't a hidden carbon footprint there where they're using carbon-based energy to cover for those periods of time, such as at night when wind tends to be low and of course there is no solar. So you want to make sure that you don't have a hidden carbon footprint on that. And lastly, around water supply for users, one of the things you need to include in that is a recognition of the adjudication process on water rights in Whatcom County, which is basically, I mean, firstly, there is a negotiation which ultimately will not, it may settle some things, but won't settle all of the issues because not all of the water users in Whatcom County are involved in that negotiation. And so whatever result of the negotiation can't really be, I don't think, legally binding on people who are not parties to the negotiation in the first place. So the adjudication will go forward, and part of providing water supply for people in need or new uses is you need to be involved in the adjudication process, which I'm sure you will be, but with a view towards having water for these other as yet undefined future uses, and to make sure that in the adjudication, your water rights will cover that. So those were just a couple of items that I had.
Thank you, Rick.
Looks like no other comments.
Thank you, Ann. So we'll close the public comment period. Jim?
So I just wanted to bring back the original slide. Of course, we talked a little bit about, the timing of the initiatives. And Commissioner Murphy, your comment about getting staff engaged in this discussion, I think is the intent of that line there that says routine staff updates. We should have named that something else, but that's staff engagement. Then the goal on July 27th there in the far left is to approve the job profile, the job description, the initiatives 2021, and the compensation package in order for Prothman to do their work. And obviously part of that, we will have them, John and I will talk to them about filling some of these details. How does the commission participate? What's the schedule look like, and that type of thing. So our goal is to get that done for you so that you can launch the process right after the 27th.
Great, thank you, Jim.
So the idea for next Tuesday is kind of that you've received our feedback, everything kind of has a bow on it, and we're ready to make a motion to approve it and essentially pass the baton to Prothman on the GM recruitment.
That's the goal.
Okay.
Keep in mind, if we're still wordsmithing the initiatives or the statement of climate change, you can do that, the next week or so. It'll take them a while to be going. The critical ones for you are going to be, I think, the logistics that we were talking about, how the commission participates, making sure you're square with that. The job description and the compensation package are going to be the three big ones that you're going to want to have agreement on the commission before you go forward. And that's the goal for next week.
Great.
Jim, I learned something different from Prothman. That's the goal.
Okay.
Jim, Steve, John, you must have some idea of a compensation package at this time. Will we learn about it on the 27th during our meeting, or are we going to learn about it beforehand?
Jim and I can raise that from McDonald's perspective when we speak to him later this week. I don't have a sense of what the compensation package would be at this time. I have no basis to look at that. I can speculate on things, and that would be dangerous. I think we'll wait to hear from Prothman, and they may wait till they see what the candidates are and what they're saying, but we can explore that with McDonald when Jim and I speak this week, and look at diving with you on Tuesday.
And a few things they're going to commission, they're going to turn to you and ask what you want to do. For example, are you willing to enter into an employment contract? You know, that obviously, I don't have an opinion about that for you, if it's a good idea or not. Are you going to provide them a car allowance? There's going to be a few questions they're going to have for you in that package. And Commissioner, I like John, I don't want to speculate on what kind of salary you're looking at. The world has changed quite a bit.
And I agree with you, Jim. I know that. I just am concerned about the compensation package. If it has to be who knows what, do we have to give up something that we're doing already to fund a general manager?
Yep.
You know, I have no idea. And it does bring concerns to me because I don't know, I'm not going to throw any numbers out there, but if it's a big number plus the package benefits and everything else, it could be quite an impact to this PUD, and it may cost us in some way of giving something up to fill that position. So I don't know. I do have concerns.
I do think though that I hear what Jim, I heard what you just said, you know, that it may come down to the candidate that you're considering offering a position to. And I think that absolutely gives you an opportunity to quote negotiate that package. But typically, I would assume that won't change in terms of how Prothman moves forward when they send out the initial offering. They typically have a salary range and at least a list of benefits, not putting numbers on them in terms of financial numbers, but usually have a pretty solid statement as to what kind of benefits will be provided. Weeks of vacation, sick leave, insurance, that kind of a thing. So I would expect that Prothman would want to get that, at least that salary range and package of benefits ready before they start the actual search.
And I know you want to get started, but they may need another round with the commission to come back to you after next Tuesday as these issues get raised, right? I don't think it'll slow up the process because they can start to get out and get the advertising in place and all of that. So, but they may take another meeting for you on the compensation package.
It might be good. It might be good as you and John have discussion with Mr. McDonald as to just how would he approach, or how would they approach helping the commission establish that compensation package, Yeah. Compared to other PUDs, compared to municipal, general, or city manager, just where would they look at today?
Well, Steve, what will be the final? I mean, if you say it's based on your customers, we have very few customers. If it's based on our revenue, we have a fairly good large revenue. We are unique in a lot of ways. We do not have 50 to 100,000 connections. It's just going to be very difficult to make that decision for me when the time comes.
Well, and I'm not suggesting that that's the approach that you should take, but the WAPUDA puts out an annual salary survey that lists, it's focused mainly on the general manager position, but it includes other upper management positions like finance, operations, lead engineer, those kind of things. And with the general manager, there are different comparisons. One is number of customers. Another is revenue, total revenue. Another is, does the GM have a contract? Does that GM have car allowance? Does that, and so they've been doing that for years, that survey. And then they rank, not not prioritizing, ranking, what they see as the number one position, but then they list all those different comparisons. So average salary for general manager, median salaries for general manager, percentage of increase from the last year, that the report was, or the survey was taken. And then they also include in that, number of customers, revenue-based, number of employees, that kind of a thing. And if you look back at those surveys and the results of those surveys over the last 10 years, I think you can start seeing, the trend. What we do, what Ann has done in doing that in comparison for the general manager position, is we typically take out, there's 28 PUDs in the state, and typically 27 of them report. Snohomish PUD typically does not participate in that survey. But so what we've done, we
They
take,
break the average for us.
well, they do. Well, they not necessarily. If you look at the top GM typically has been for years Chelan.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And then Grant probably is right there. So what we do is we take out the too low and the too high, and then say, now what's the new average? It doesn't change much. But if you take out the too high and the too low, and then you look at the median, that changes a little bit. And typically, my salary has been almost right there between, right above or right below average up until the last 3 to 4 years. And we consistently over the last 3 or 4 years have dropped below that. So,
Well, so we're getting way above average GM for, the average salary. We're getting our money's worth, Steve, huh?
I suppose you could look at all. The point is that I think that's something that somebody like Prossman can use as and that information I think is also available for a lot of the city managers, and so I don't know how much of that is available, like for the water districts around the state, water and sewer districts, but I think that Prossman could probably garner that. So I think that there's a good solid database out there. The other is that what I just brought up before is that when you look at just salary and then without knowing what all the other benefits may be, and they may be more meaningful in terms of negotiated, package with an individual. The individual life insurance may be more valuable. Disability insurance might be more valuable, depending upon the age and, their personal, their family issues. So those are the kind of things that I think that building that database is, compensation, but also benefits. It's going to be important for you to understand what it's going to take to attract the individual that that you want. And that today is different. I think is totally different today, not because of where the commission may be moving the district in a different direction or an expanded direction, in terms of broadband or whatever it is, but just historically over the last, I'd say the last 10 years, there's been a significant change in what those, top general manager position and top management positions in public sector seen. And I think that it's more so in ports and public utilities and less so in municipal and county government. So,
Thank you, Steve.
And for what it's worth, we can get all the county officials' salary information. I was on the salary commission for the county for 2 terms that just ended, and we can pull all that data from the auditor, the executives, all that information to see what other department heads anyways or leaders in the county are paid, if that's of interest.
It's of interest. I wouldn't suggest a big data dump, but some summaries would be great.
Okay.
Are there other items, Jim, you want to cover today?
No, I'm good. I've got my notes here and I will contact John right after the meeting.
Commissioners, any other items on this topic that we want to cover today?
No, just thanks to Jim. I'm eager for the next steps. I think we're in a good position here. So thank you, Jim, for helping us today and others.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Jim and everybody who's been involved in this process, commissioners, staff as well. We are in a much better defined place today than we were at the beginning of the year, and it's we all work together to get here. So it's been great teamwork, and I'm really grateful for all of that. I'd like to take a little bit of discretion, Steve, in asking you before we wrap up for another drought update, only because it's such a rapidly evolving situation, and I believe there's another governor's declaration, if you don't mind.
it'd be very brief, Commissioner. You know, I think I sent out the email to everybody that, and you probably saw it in other media. But the governor has declared a drought emergency across the entire state, with the exception of King County. And King County, apparently, based upon water supply through the city of Seattle and other resources within King County, based upon the reservoirs that they have available that are publicly owned by you know, not the city of Seattle, but other public utilities. They feel that King County is in a good position. So what that means in terms of Whatcom County, I haven't been engaged much at all in any of the discussions, especially around you know, special opportunities for the Department of Ecology to work with mainly with agriculture, and possibly with a couple of the smaller cities in the county in terms of special permits for you know, interruptible water rights. But we have not received any additional calls other than from the private well owners that, you know, that we advised you a couple of weeks ago. And I can tell you that, you know, the stream flow, the main stem stream flow continues to drop. I wouldn't say dramatically, but you know, the projected stream flow at Ferndale that was projected 2 weeks ago, we're right on track. It drops about 6 inches in gauge height per day. And that has not yet affected us in terms of our ability to draw out of the river at either of our plants. So I will say that I think that it was in retrospect, it was a good move to have us build that Vista Road line to connect to Grandview Water, the fire supply system. I just went out yesterday and walked around the open air pond that we have out there. And it's the first time since I've been at the PUD in almost 16 years that there's more soil showing on the shoreline than I've ever seen. And I think the pond level has dropped about 2.5 to 3 feet. Would we still be able to draw upon it for fire supply? possibly.
Hmm.
But we definitely made the right decision, the commission, in supporting the building that connection from our industrial system to the water supply system out there. So that's all I had, Commissioner.
Well, thank
Steve,
you
if
for.
I, oh, I'm
go ahead,
sorry,
Commissioner.
Oscar.
No,
Steve,
please
is
go
that
ahead.
California Creek that provides to that?
Well, the drainage, the California Creek drainage, yes. And, but that, that's all surface water flow into that pond. And most of the water that goes into that pond is actually surface flow and some groundwater spring in that area just west and southwest of the pond, up on the hill above Grandview Road. So, but the creek itself, if you look at the flow that comes across I-5 from the I-5 industrial area, and then the drainage that comes from, say, from the I-5 Grandview interchange there, and that flows into California Creek. California Creek, as it crosses Delta Line Road, there's no movement. There's water sitting in there, but there's no movement whatsoever.
So Steve, if there had not been objection and we had moved forward with our California Creek project and had implemented it at this time, how would that have looked different today?
We would be, I mean, the California Creek project, the grant, the program, we were supposed to use, or we were proposing to use our Vista Road line supply to put water into California Creek at the Grandview Business Park area. So going downstream from that area, we would have been able to improve stream flow for habitat purposes and possible for any surface water permitted surface water withdrawals for others downstream in California Creek. By not doing that project at this point, there is not that opportunity. So.
Maybe some photographs would be helpful.
Well, just as we're talking right now, I see I got an email that Mary Werner from Department of Ecology wants to talk to me about the California Creek project. So
Her ears are burning. Well, thank you. Thanks for that diversion from the topic of the meeting. Apologize for that, but I think it's important. We're in the middle of a crisis. We should all be doing everything we can at this point to recognize that and educate each other about it and support each other. Go ahead, Steve.
I would just say that this is an example of what I believe Christine brought up earlier in terms of climate change and climate impact. I think it's just one example of how the work that we do and what the work that we propose to do in terms of just our core operations, how we can do more in working with the community on offsetting the impacts of climate change. It's sort of in an inverse sort of different way, but I think it's a good example of just that. And the other is that as we see the flow in the main stem dropping down as much as it is, we need to address climate change and stream flow strictly on how that is going to impact our ability to serve our existing customers at Cherry Point at some point. And, it's going to be reality that we're going to have to deal with that in terms of even looking again at storage, other sources of supply. So anyway.
Thank you, Steve. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, let's conclude the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance. It was a very productive meeting. Thank you, Jim, again, and everyone's support. I will call this meeting of the Whatcom County PUD to a close. Thank you all. Bye-bye.